Hey everyone, so by the title of this video, you already know that today we are going to be going over some hummingbird feeder tips and tricks, and then towards the end of the video, I'm also going to be making some nectar. So the first tip that I have for your hummingbird feeder is to clean it. Hummingbird feeders can get like moldy, nasty. The nectar itself can go bad, so you want to make sure you're giving your hummingbird feeder a good like scrub with a brush, which I have here. So you're going to want to make sure you clean your hummingbird feeder at least once a week. You can try pushing it through the winter to maybe like a week and a half, but you just got to be careful. It's important because if your nectar spoils, if it goes bad, you run the risk of your hummingbird not coming back to that feeder anymore. So like I said, preferably once a week, like during the winter. Now, the warmer that it gets outside, you're gonna want to clean it more often. So for example, for most of the summer, I give it a good clean once a week with my brush, but then I take it down every couple of days and rinse it out with water and then put some of the stored nectar that I have in the fridge into the feeder. So clean your feeders. I also suggest keeping your hummingbird feeders underneath like the eave of your house or something kind of along those lines, because that protects it from the sun, which will help, with it spoiling. And it also helps during like freezing weather. It keeps like the rain and the snow off your feeders. And it also helps with keeping multiple feeders separated. And we'll go over that more in a moment. Underneath the eave of your house, good option. Underneath maybe certain trees, anything that kind of protects the feeder is a good idea. Because if you leave it out in the middle of the yard, it's just going to get baked by the sun. Now, another important thing to worry about is freezing. So especially if you live like in a place like me, we have a certain type of hummingbird that stays around all winter. It doesn't migrate with like a lot of the other hummingbirds. So they tend to rely on my nectar obviously more, and since I've been feeding them for so long, like it's a concern that if I stop putting out the nectar, something could happen, right? And so when it gets below freezing, which it does here all the time, you have to worry about your nectar freezing. So obviously the first thing to do is, if it freezes overnight, it's really simple. Just bring your feeder down after it's dark and put it back up before the sun comes up. Because obviously your little hummingbirds are going to be hungry in the morning, they're going to be cold, so you want it out there bright and early. Now, if it's continuing to freeze during the day, that's obviously a little bit more tricky. But I do have some suggestions. So one thing that worked for me as I was working from home was to put little hand warmers like inside wool socks and then wrap the socks around the hummingbird feeder. And then I would just kind of check on it to make sure it wasn't freezing. This past winter, that didn't work out too well for me because it was like 10 to 15 degrees for like a week straight, and it was freezing fast. So some other options I've been looking into and thinking about are, obviously, they do sell heated hummingbird feeders. I believe they're more on the pricey side, but they do sell them, and then that's obviously easy. You plug it in and you're done. Another thing I've seen people do is like heating lamps. They like fix them to the eave of their house or whatever, and but keep it a safe distance so the birds don't mess with it or get hurt. And it just keeps it warm all the time. That obviously seems like a little more of a pain in the butt, but it also seems like a really good solution. So I just thought I would throw that one in there too. And like, this tip is really important to me, especially because of where I live and how they don't migrate, and how they can become dependent on us for our food source. So this past winter, my like local news put a story out, put a little article out on Facebook, and they were talking about the freezing temps and giving tips and suggestions on what to do for your hummingbirds. And so everybody's in the comments, they're leaving their little tips, they're posting pictures of their birds and their feeders, and then someone leaves a picture of her hummingbird feeders in the middle of the yard. Already wrong, girl. And then two, it's covered with snow, like there's multiple inches on it, and the poor little hummingbird is just sitting on top. And dude, everybody was putting the angry faces on that comment and stuff. And somebody finally commented back on it. It was like, the nectar's frozen. You need to thaw it out. Like, he can't eat. And I don't think she ever responded to it, at least from what I saw. I was just like, you're commenting on a post that's specifically talking about the problem that you're taking a picture of. That's not the solution. Moral of the story, please watch out for freezing and try to prevent it if possible, if you're going to feed them year round and stuff. Please. I mean, keep in mind, when it's freezing outside like that, I believe that hummingbirds can freeze to death within like 30 minutes. And if you do come across a hummingbird that is frozen on the ground, don't just assume that it's dead. You know, you can pick it up and you can take it inside and keep it somewhere warm, and sometimes they do recover. So going back to locations on where to hang your feeder, obviously, like I said, out of the sun, under cover preferably, but also it's ideal to have multiple feeders and to hang them separately so that they're not visible to each other, because hummingbirds can be territorial, and I believe they can guard up to like half an acre. So, and I've watched them. They like, I have one that will chase all the other ones off, and he mainly hangs out at my back feeder, and I have two more like during the winter that tend to hang out together on the front one, which I'll insert some videos of that. It's really cute. So if you hang them separately where your territorial bird can't guard both of them at the same time, then you can have your other hummingbirds, you know, be able to come in and get some nectar too. I've noticed that it's not as bad and they're not as territorial during the spring and the summer, obviously, because there's an abundance of food sources, you know, so it makes sense. In the winter, he's like, that's my nectar, you know, especially where I live, because like I said, it gets down well below freezing. Now, when it comes to the nectar that we're about to make, I believe it's like recommended to store for like 7 days in the fridge. Sometimes you can push it. I definitely wouldn't push it any more than 14. Like, don't. I wouldn't even let it get to 14. But it is nice to make it in bigger batches, especially during the heat, like I was saying, because you can rinse your feeders, refill it from the fridge. I also don't recommend using the store-bought. I've personally bought it before when I first started putting feeders out, and number one, they wouldn't even come to it and drink it. And number two, I also have heard that there's additives in it that are not good for hummingbirds. So that's just a thought. I just suggest making it homemade, and it's easy. Like, why are you going to go waste plastic and spend extra money when you can, it takes 2 ingredients. So let's see here. Clean your feeders, keep them out of the sun and out of the elements preferably. What else did we go through? Make sure they don't freeze during the winter. Keep in mind that nectar goes bad faster the warmer it is, and you need to clean more the warmer it is. I might insert this little chart I had. You can screenshot it. It may be helpful. Keep multiple feeders around your property separated so they can't be, you know, guarded by one bird. Take your nectar and store it in the fridge. I think that's about it, right? Hopefully this whole video made sense and I can piece it together so it doesn't seem like such random thoughts. So now let's go into the kitchen and I will show you how I make nectar. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is boil the water. The recipe is 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. So if you were gonna do 4 cups of water, you would do 1 cup of sugar. I already made nectar the other day, so I'm halving the recipe. We're gonna do 2 cups of water and 1/2 cup of sugar. So I'm just gonna let this boil and then we'll be back. So I've seen some people say that in order to shorten the cooling time, you can boil like 2 cups of water, have 2 cold cups of water. I don't recommend doing that because part of the reason we're boiling is to get out any impurities for the hummingbirds. So I just don't suggest using cold water and hot water. Now that our water is boiling, we're going to add the sugar. Give it a quick stir so that it all dissolves. So I've seen some recipes that say after you add the sugar, continue to boil it for 1 minute, and supposedly that helps like keep your nectar better longer, I believe. And I've seen some that say do not boil it because it weakens the sugar. And to be honest with you, I've done it both ways and the hummingbirds still eat it, but I mainly just do it this way because I guess I would prefer not to weaken the sugar, and they still go to it, so I've had no problems. You're just going to want to let your nectar completely cool. You know, you obviously don't want to be giving your hummingbirds scalding nectar or even too hot of nectar, so cool completely. Maybe even refrigerate before filling your nectar. Whatever you gotta do, just make sure it's completely cooled. Excuse me, ma'am. Completely cooled. And then that's it. You're ready to go. Well, that is all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.